All right, welcome everybody. It is Monday night, and this is the third of 3 episodes with Cal Ewing, where we're learning about notes. And I don't know about you guys, but I have loved the first 2 sessions, and I'm learning a lot because I've done notes on a small scale, but not at the same level that Cal is. So I'm learning a lot of stuff. And so Cal, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Always good
Glad
to
to
have
be
you.
here yeah. Oh, Melanie has a question and she's a piano teacher, so she's probably
I should say,
not
I
getting
think
what
she's
she
just
was
waving
hoping
to you. I think
for.
she's saying hi, but
Notes on a small
I think
scale,
she's
says
applauding that
Michael.
you're here. Or but if you have a question, of course, you can unmute.
I was just clapping.
You were just
Welcome
clapping.
me
Oh,
to the stage, Cal.
gotcha. I
Clapping.
just thought,
Welcome to the stage, Cal
being a
Ewing.
musician, you were
Exactly.
wondering when we are going to actually talk about music.
I know I think notes is my niche for real estate. Seriously.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And I'm loving that it totally combines with my other love of
It
notes.
fits your brand.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Totally fits your brand.
Totally.
I like that.
Yeah, it does. I was thinking about notes squared, like two kinds of notes, like
Yeah. Well, it is a great strategy, and it's one of those strategies that works pretty well, pretty amazing no matter what the market's doing, because if the market's strong, you see a lot of performing notes. When there's a lot of challenges in the economy, you see a lot of non-performing notes, and either way, you can monetize either one. So that's the good news. So it doesn't really matter what's going on. There's always going to be notes out there, because as long as people are taking out mortgages, whether they be first mortgages, second mortgages, etc., that creates opportunities for us. So I will let Cal take it away. I have people messaging me, I think, about trying to get on. So
actually, just you saying that, Mike, about the markets, I'm just pulling up an article that I'm actually doing my next or this week's newsletter about. I'm going to share my screen here. This was not part of my plan, but I'll share it right now for you guys. So we talked about PaperStack as a place where you can find notes. It's a platform that's been created to help people like you and I buy notes, and it facilitates the whole process from start to finish. And so I am on their newsletter, and they just released this last week, and it's their end of the year market report. And I just found it really interesting. So these are just notes that they have sold on their platform in 2023. And so they gave some statistics, and I thought it'd be useful to just share this with you guys, just so you can see kind of like how the pricing right now is working on different types of notes. So this here is the average investment. So the purchase price of the note to the balance owing on that note, the principal balance that's unpaid. So if you're bidding on a performing mortgage note where the borrower has been paying consistently, on average, their buyers have been paying about 81% of value. Okay. So if you're going in and throwing 60% bids, and wondering why you're not getting anything accepted, that's why. And that's kind of how I started. I didn't really have a firm grasp on where I needed to be bidding, and I was getting rejected a lot. So it's good to know kind of where the market's at as far as bids go. And then non-performing notes, they're on average about 51% of the unpaid balance, which makes a lot of sense because there's more work to do. There's more risk. There's different exit strategies that require money, like paying for an attorney and things like that. So non-performing are always or almost always going to be selling at a bigger discount than performing. And then we haven't talked a lot about second position notes, but same kind of thing. So you can expect, because if you're in second position, you don't have the same kind of security that a first position note has. So the first position always gets paid first, right? And so there's higher risk if you buy a second. And so that's why a performing second is going to sell at 63% of the balance, and then non-performing at 49. So the non-performing are about the same, but the big difference is performing. And then this one here is the purchase price, the average investment to the value of the property that's securing the note. So you can see here, all the buyers on PaperStack are looking for major equity, right, to protect their investment. So, and then this makes sense because usually seconds are small, so they're going to be way lower than the value of the property no matter what. But the first is pretty interesting. And then this is the average sale price on PaperStack So right around 30,000. So that's an indication of what types of notes are being bought and sold on that platform. So we're not talking about, $1 million homes, mortgages on $1 million homes in California or something like that. It's a lot of like Midwest, smaller market stuff that people are buying. And it's more like investor trading back and forth and that kind of thing. So for anyone that's watching that doesn't have deep pockets, which a lot of people don't, it is a good platform to get going with notes because they're lower bid amounts that most people can handle. So I just thought that was interesting, and I'm actually doing a newsletter about that this week.
Very cool.
Anyways,
Michael,
before we get,
by the way, has a question.
oh
for
yeah,
you.
sure.
On the first one, you showed the difference between first and second position on a non-performing note was only 2%. I would have expected that to be a much greater difference, given that it's already not performing. And if the first position isn't getting paid, what are the chances you're going to get paid as the second position?
Yeah, well, it could be more because of foreclosure. So in most cases, especially if you got those low balance to value, low loan to value, maybe that's it. I don't know. That's a good point.
And also, one of the things that you need to know is that when you're in the second position, even though the first lender could potentially foreclose before you, a lot of times you can go and negotiate with that first lender and buy them out and sometimes get a discount on that first mortgage. And now you control the entire thing. So there's different strategies that are more advanced. So that might have something to do with it. But yeah, I was kind of surprised too when I saw that statistic. I would have thought there'd be a really big discrepancy between the two. So
yeah. All right. So I'll dive into our presentation today. I'm just sharing my screen again. Back to PowerPoint today. Slideshow. Okay, you guys can see the presentation? Okay, yeah. So today we are going to talk about due diligence. So we've covered how to find notes and how to analyze a deal. Now we're going to go, let's say we had our bids accepted. Now what are we going to do to make sure that we're actually buying a decent note and it's a good investment, and try to identify any potential pitfalls or any danger that we may want to avoid, or maybe even back out of the deal. So that's what this is going to be about today, is what to do next. And the cool thing about investing in notes that I was a little bit surprised about when I first got into this was the fact that you don't have to put any earnest money down like you do with a house. And it's way more easygoing. So the closing date, the funding date is less serious. Like you can kind of say when you're going to fund or purchase the note, and the seller is going to be like, okay, that sounds great. But a lot of times it's really super flexible. If you need another week or something like that, you don't have to, sign any documents. It's mainly just communication and saying why. And then usually the seller is going to extend their time. And then same thing with the purchase. Like if you want to get out of a deal, you're not going to risk losing any earnest money if you back out of the deal, as long as you have a reason that makes sense. So if you can point out your reasons for backing out and they make sense, then, no harm, no foul, you're out of the deal, and that's it. No money lost. So that's kind of cool. And so some of these things we're going to talk about might be reasons why you'd want to back out of a particular deal, or possibly renegotiate your bid. So they call it fading your bid. And so typically what happens is when you get a tape of notes like we looked at last week, there might be like 100 notes on there, and you might be making bids, or maybe it's just one note like on PaperStack. You find one that makes sense to you, you make your bid. Well, that's when, if they accept that bid, that's when the clock starts to do all the rest of this. So a lot of times you can run your basic calculations with the spreadsheet that I gave you or something similar, make a bid and make a whole bunch of bids at once. And then once you get them accepted, then you can spend your time and effort and dollars in doing your due diligence. So here's kind of the basic steps. So if the borrower, we talked about, sorry, these are, I think that was not supposed to be there. Sorry, that was from last week. Okay. So the first thing is property value. And that's the main thing you want to start with is, okay, if we're going to buy a note, that's all great, but it doesn't really matter what our purchase price is if we have no idea the value of the asset securing your investment, right? Because how do we know if it's a good buy or a bad buy if we don't know the value of the collateral? And so just like when we're wholesaling houses or buying a rental or a fix and flip, we want to know the property value first and foremost. And so how most people start and how I start is when you're looking at all those types of notes, the easiest thing to do is just go on Zillow or one of those similar websites like Redfin or Trulia or whatever, realtor.com or whichever ones have property value estimates. Use those as a starting point. And then once you get your bid accepted, then you can worry about getting more accurate. And that's what a lot of times, that's what note sellers will actually do is they will use the Zillow value when they populate the tape and then send it out to potential buyers. So they're even relying on the value that Zillow provides. Looks like we got a question. Oh, Note Squared is available. There you go. All right. So that's how you can start if you want to just go through a tape fast. Some of you guys were using PropStream, especially anyone that did the wholesale course. PropStream's great because they have really good value estimates and you can pull and run comps, like a very rough CMA on any property in PropStream. You can pick and choose which comps you use and you can do it in a couple minutes. So that's a really good way to do a rough analysis to get your basic value. And then once your bid's accepted, that's when it's time to get more precise with your value. And in most cases, we're looking for the as-is value, okay? And that's because really, if we're buying a note, especially if it's a performing note or it's a note where you hope to get the borrower back on track, you don't really care about the potential value if it's remodeled because that's not really what we're buying this for, right? We're looking for cash flow and collecting the principal and interest payments every month. So we're really just focused on what is it worth now, and then what's our investment compared to that value. But some strategies where people are buying notes that are non-performing, maybe they're vacant, those are perfect notes where you'd foreclose and then take over the property and then maybe do a fix and flip. So if that's your strategy, then of course you'd want to look at maybe an after repair value, ARV, okay? And so how we do that is very similar to buying a house. Most people in the note investing space rely on what's called a broker price opinion, a BPO. And that's a little bit different than a CMA, a realtor comparative market analysis. The main difference is when you ask a realtor to pull a CMA, they're going to go on the MLS and they're going to look at the size, location, age, beds and baths, square footage of the property. And then they're going to look for recent properties that sold in that area that are very similar, and then recent properties that are on the market right now. But a lot of times they're not actually going to be looking at your subject property and the condition it's in and factoring that in. They're just looking at the basic features. Whereas a broker price opinion, you're going to pay a little bit more for that, but the broker is actually going to be looking, maybe driving to the property, looking at the external condition, and then they're actually going to factor in the cost of repairs on anything they notice into their final assessment of value. So it's kind of like halfway between an appraisal and a CMA. It's not as good as an appraisal, but it's way cheaper than an appraisal, okay? Jonathan, did I get that right? You're a realtor. Is that kind of the difference in your mind between a BPO and a CMA? Okay. All right. So you could use either one though. The thing about, you can't really get an appraisal because as a lender, you're buying the note that someone's living in. So you don't really have the rights to go and, intrude on them to have an appraiser come into the house. So BPO is our next best thing. All right. And then the other thing we want to look at is property condition, okay? And it seems like our Google Street Maps are getting more and more accurate and they're doing passes more and more frequently. So I'm noticing in a lot of major cities now, they'll have, they'll update the images every single year now. And so you can get some pretty accurate Google Street views of the property. And it's pretty easy to assess the neighborhood and then obviously the house itself. And just to see, what kind of condition it's in. Does it look vacant? All the same stuff as if you're buying a house, like does it need a new roof? Are there broken windows? You know, is it lived in? Is it well maintained? And all of those things are things to factor in, because you need to think all the time, if I buy this note and I have to foreclose and take the property back, is this a property that I would want to own? Okay. So if you find a note on a cheese factory and you're like, oh, this might be a good deal, you got to think, well, do I actually want to foreclose and own a cheese factory if things go wrong? And Jonathan's shaking his head, yes, but but most people probably wouldn't, right? So that's and my
I
job
love
is
cheese.
underwriting. Yeah, well, me too. But one of the main things when I started my day-to-day job as an underwriter here in Calgary, my boss was like, look, always consider that. Do we want to own this piece of property should things go bad? And if the answer is no, then we don't want to fund this loan. And it's exactly the same with real estate. Okay. The other thing we can get or look at is previous MLS listings, because a lot of times if the property sold recently, there's going to be interior photos. And if it was only a few years ago, then you can really get a good idea of what it's like inside. Hoping that the borrower hasn't completely trashed it since they took ownership, but a lot of times they wouldn't. And then you can actually order something called a PCR, or a property condition report, which is someone local would come by and do kind of like the BPO, where they're going to look at the property, they're going to tell you if it's vacant, they're going to look for damage, they're going to check out the neighborhood. So they're just going to give you an idea of what the condition of that property is, as far as what repairs they can see are needed. And this is something you can do on notes that you already own. It's a good idea to do it on a year by year basis, is just get one of these done on a note you already own, especially if you don't live in that market, just so you can keep track of your assets and what the condition of those properties is. Okay. And then occupancy is huge, right? So especially if it's a non-performing note, if that house is vacant, the odds of you getting that note reperforming are very slim, because the people have already given up and moved away or walked away, or maybe they passed away. And so most people don't want to, start making mortgage payments on a house that they're not even living in. Okay. Unless it's maybe a rental property or something. So if it's vacant, you're going to know that if it's a non-performing note, your only option is probably to foreclose. And so you can prepare for that once you know it's vacant. If there's owners in there, and especially if they're taking care of the property, then that's a prime candidate for a reperforming situation, where you can maybe work with that borrower and try to get them paying again, figure out what their problems are, and try to get that note reperforming again. Okay. All right. And then the last thing is, sometimes note sellers, I mentioned this before, but some banks and note sellers will actually sell notes that are in foreclosure. Like the process has already started. And so if it's a vacant property, there may be an internal report that bank has, especially in northern climates. Say you're like looking in like Wisconsin or something like that, they may have gone in and winterized that property. And so there may be photos that you can access to get an idea of what it looks like inside. Okay, the next thing is property taxes. So you always want to make sure even before you bid, is probably a good idea, is go to the county appraisal district, or the treasurer, or whatever the taxing entity is. It's different for different states. But you can almost always online search an address and find out if the property taxes are current or if they are behind. Okay. Now, if they are behind and unpaid, the county has the right to foreclose on that property, even with you as the note holder. Okay. Even if you have first lien position, the county has the right to go and foreclose on that property for unpaid taxes. And so one thing you're going to need to factor in is that when you buy that note, if you don't want to lose that property, you may have to pay those taxes. Okay. And so you want to drop your bid amount back to cover those costs. And you can go to the seller and say, look, I know I bid $25,000 for this note, but there's $3,000 owing in taxes I'm going to have to get current. So I need to back my bid down by $3,000. Okay. And so that's easy to do. And it's good to know ahead of time, so you don't have to come out of pocket for unseen expense or unforeseen expense. And Netra Online is a really good place to search if this will work. if you just go to public records online, and you can do this for any kind of, I use this all the time. Like if you're looking to buy a house, cash, if you're wholesaling, there's all kinds of reasons to, or tax auctions, all kinds of reasons to check out Netra Online and go to public records. And then you can search by state and then by county. My internet's going kind of slow here. There we go. So you just choose whatever state, and then it'll give you a list of counties, and then it'll tell you the link to the tax office. So you just use that. Okay. The next thing is oops, let's go back and presentations. So next thing is title search. And you always want to order a title search, or in the note business, it's called an O&E report, which is owner and encumbrance report. It's basically just a title search. And the reason for this is a couple things. First of all, you want to know, is the current owner the same as the person on the mortgage note? Because sometimes people will quit claim their rights and sell the property to someone else, but keep the mortgage in, like kind of like a subject to. They'll keep the mortgage on the property, but a new owner is now making the payments. So that could be something to look out for. You want to make sure there's no issues in the transfer of title from one buyer to the next, because especially if maybe someone passes away, or you know, things like quick claim deeds, where it can get really messy sometimes, people transferring ownership. And if you go to foreclose and there's an issue with title, you may not be able to foreclose because they may be able to contest it. Someone might say, well, I didn't mean to like get rid of this property. I should be the owner, but now I'm not, or who knows what could happen. So you always want to make sure you know what you're getting into as far as the title history of the property. And then even more so, if you're buying a mortgage note, you want to know the mortgage assignment history, okay? Because a lot of times banks will buy and sell mortgages back and forth. And how they do that is they do it through an assignment of mortgage or assignment of a deed of trust. And so maybe Wells Fargo is going to assign this note to Chase Bank, and then they're going to assign it to some smaller bank, and then they're going to assign it to some investor who then sells it to you, right? So you want to make sure that there's no missing assignments. And maybe the person selling it to you isn't even the owner of the note because there was a mistake, right? So you're going to buy a note that you don't even have the rights to, right? So you always want to make sure that you understand the history of that mortgage as it's been transferred from one party to the next, and that there's no issues there, okay? And then we also want to look at other things like liens and judgments against the borrower. If that borrower has a bunch of judgments against them, that's a sign that there's a lot going on that's not good, you know, financially. So that's something to be aware of. Federal IRS liens, things like that. It's good to know what's on title of that property. And then the other great thing is a title search will usually have a property tax report on it as well. So from there, you'll also be able to see if there's any taxes owing, property taxes that are owing on the property. Any questions about anything so far? Okay. Okay, so then the next thing, which is a little different than buying houses, everything so far has been pretty similar to when we buy a house. But next is the servicing notes and the payment history. So as I mentioned before, let's move these down. If you want to buy a note that's been serviced by a licensed note servicer, you don't want just someone that has an Excel spreadsheet, or even worse, like a piece of paper, and they're marking down the payments each month. You want a company that knows how to service a mortgage, and they're keeping good records of all the payments, late fees that are applied, property taxes and insurance payments, like everything. You want to be able to see all of that information accurately, and you want to be able to trust that that information is correct, okay? And so I don't buy anything that's self-serviced. I always want a servicing company involved. And the good thing about a servicing company is they'll be able to provide you with their notes, which is like it's a log of all the communication they've had with the borrower, whether it's emails that are sent, they'll have a copy of the email. If it's attempts to phone the borrower, they'll let you know if they've made contact or if they've left a voicemail. if the borrower called in, why they called in, what their problems were. So you can see all of that. And then you can also see their history of payment and really gauge what kind of a borrower they are. So if you see payments every single month on time, you know it's a great borrower and you probably don't have to worry about them. If you can tell if a borrower is making sporadic payments, but they have like a pattern, or maybe they haven't made payments in 12 months. So that is one of the most important pieces of information you can get, because you can really understand that borrower story just from those 2 bits of information. Okay. All right. Then there's something called a collateral file. Okay. And what this is another note industry lingo word for basically all the documents that are involved, basically that you're buying when you buy a note. Okay. And you want to review all these documents to make sure that there's no errors. So you want to make sure that, like I said, you can track the assignments from one note investor or bank to the next. And you want to make sure that the dates are all correct. The names on the note is correct. There's no errors. And you just want to make sure everything's there. There's no documents missing. Okay. So, and if there is something missing, it's not the end of the world. I can connect you with, we'll probably talk about them later, a company that can actually help you correct something to make it, turn a bad deal into a good one and fix the problem so that you have no issues moving forward. But you want to be able to identify any problems with any of the paperwork and just make sure it's all there. Okay. So the deed is the document when that note or that property owner acquires the property, they get a deed. Okay. The note is the promise to pay that outlines all the terms of the mortgage, right? So the interest rate, the amount they're borrowing, who the lender is, when they pay it off, how much their payment is. Okay. So those are like the rules, right? The deed of trust or mortgage is the document that secures that loan to the property. So if you don't have that, then it's not necessarily secured to that house. Okay, so if there's any issues with that document, that could be trouble. And then the assignments are a transfer of ownership of the house or the property, and then also of the note itself. And then there's a word called an allonge, which I had never heard of before I got into this side of the business. And an allonge is kind of like an assignment. It's how you transfer the actual mortgage note from one person to another. And that document doesn't ever get recorded with the county the way an assignment does. So it's a piece of paper that you're never going to see in the public records, but it basically just says, so like if, let's just say Mike's buying a note from me, I would have an allonge that says that this promissory note, Mike Wolf is now acquiring it from me, the seller, and now it's his, okay? Whereas an assignment is what you do for the deed of trust or mortgage. So the assignment would be, I am assigning my rights to this deed of trust to Mike Wolf. He's now buying it from me. He's the new assignee or owner of the deed of trust. So assignment for deed of trust, allonge for the note. And then the last thing you want to look at is if there's ever been any loan modifications for that borrower, because perhaps right now, maybe they got in trouble a few years back and the note holder at the time modified the loan for them, changed their payments or whatever it might be. So it's good to know what their current payments might be and their current situation with that note, because it could be different than what it was when they first originated that note, maybe 10 years ago. Okay. So that's important to be able to review that. The other important thing for owner finance notes, especially it seems like Texas, for example, is you can buy note where people have sold a home with owner financing, they create a note, and then they sell it to a note investor right away. Okay. When they originate that loan with their borrower, that they followed the RMLO, or they worked with an RMLO. It's called the Dodd-Frank rules, which they were put in like 2010 after all of the banks were basically writing whatever kind of loan.
You're free. Either I'm freezing or Cal's freezing. I'm not sure.
They want, darn it.
I think it's Cal.
Darn.
Oh, and
I'll have
then
to start doing these at like
Marco
5
says
a.m.
2008 for Frank Dodd laws.
Okay. Great. Am I good now?
Right now,
okay?
yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So you want to make sure there's a profession called a RMLO, is it residential or registered? Residential mortgage loan originator. And what their job is to look at a borrower and their entire application package. So they're going to look at their credit score, their income, their job history, all of that. And then they're going to look at the loan, and they're going to basically evaluate it to make sure that they think that that borrower can afford the loan that they're getting. Okay. And so it's there to protect the borrower, to make sure that they're not getting in a bad situation, which is going to lead them to lose their house through foreclosure. Okay. But it also protects you as the lender, because, or a note investor, because if you see that they pass through the approval of an RMLO, then you know that they were vetted properly and that they have a good chance of actually performing for you. Okay. It's not a guarantee, but at least an expert looked at it and knows that they're in a good spot, at least financially. Okay. Because you could have some note or real estate investor that doesn't care. He'll give anyone a mortgage. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they have a job. He doesn't care. Well, then you might be buying that note from them, and 2 months later, you have to foreclose on the borrower. Okay. So it's important to make sure that they've already done this, and they should have a RMLO package that they went through before they originated that loan. Okay. So then the next thing is, it's a good idea to research the borrower, because again, we're trying to figure out what this borrower is about, right? We can't really reach out to that borrower. I mean, there's ways of doing it, but you're not supposed to like just call up the borrower and say, hey, I might be your new lender. Tell me about yourself. There's ways you could do it, but in general, we want to find out as much as we can about the borrower. And so you just start being a little creepy. Get online, search their name, go on LinkedIn, see if they actually have a job, because that's important, right? If it's a non-performing note, if it looks like they're employed, well, that's a good sign, right? You might be able to see like their name on a company website. You maybe like, I was looking at a note the other day. There was a murder at the property. It was a non-performing note, and I found out that the owner of the note, I think his son was murdered at that property. And so you can find all kinds of stuff about crime, or the history of that borrower. Maybe they're deceased. You find an obituary, because that's going to be a completely different scenario, right? So just doing a little search and just trying to piece together what this borrower is all about is going to be really helpful when you're trying to figure out what your exit strategy is going to be for that note. Okay. And then if it is a non-performing note, meaning that the borrower is not paying, you always want to make sure you're asking the note seller what the foreclosure status is. Okay. So if they're 1 month behind, chances are they're not going to start foreclosure, right? But if it's a few months behind, 3 or more, well, they may have already started that foreclosure process, which is good for you, because they may have already paid some of the costs to the attorney to get them, halfway through that foreclosure process. And so you may not have to come out of pocket as much for the foreclosure costs, because they're almost done, right? Or as far as the timeline goes, it could be beneficial for you. So let's say like you're buying a note in a longer foreclosure state. And so let's say you're buying in New York, where it's like over a year. Well, if there are 90% through that foreclosure process, and you only have maybe a month to go, well, that's a completely different scenario, because you're going to get your money out really quick. You buy the note, finish the foreclosure, sell it off, you get paid. Whereas if you buy it and they haven't even started foreclosure in New York, and you got to wait a year and a half, at least maybe 2 years, to get your money back with any kind of a return. So it's really handy to make sure you understand where they are in that process, and then actually ask for the contact information of that lawyer or attorney that's handling the foreclosure, and call them and just get the download. Like, where are we at? What's been done so far? Do you expect this to go through, or is there any resistance? Are they fighting back? Do they have a strong case? you know, where you think this is going and how long do you think it's going to take to complete the foreclosure process? And what's the cost? How much is it going to cost me if I buy this note and then hire you to finish it? So that's always good. And then of course it's good to review the foreclosure laws for that state. Okay. Especially if it's in foreclosure, you want to know what you're getting yourself into ahead of time before you get too deep into the process. Okay. So if it's Texas and you can foreclose in, you know, start foreclosure in 21 days and be done it in like 3 months, that's a completely different story than waiting a year and a half. And here's a couple of resources for you guys. I've actually put a PDF of this presentation in the folder. And so there's a website here for, it's of the Fannie Mae cost estimates. I'll actually open it here if I can. I don't know why it's not letting me here. There we go. So it's Fannie Mae's guide, but it's a good resource. It might not be 100% accurate, but at least it's going to be ballpark for you. So for non-judicial foreclosure in Alabama, $1,900, okay, versus like Florida judicial, $4,750. They even have Guam on here. So if you're buying notes in Guam, you'll know what you have to pay. So I use it just as kind of a baseline. And then at least when you're setting your initial bids, you can kind of gauge what you're going to have to pay. And then you can always call or email a foreclosure attorney and get a more accurate number later. Okay. And then the other one, I'm just going to click it from here. Oh. Is the state-by-state foreclosure timeline. And this is a Google Drive folder that I have that I can share with you guys. I got it from, I don't even know how I got this. I got it from somebody. They shared it with me, but it's got all the states. So like Colorado. So here's the estimated timeline. So it tells you how many days for each step in the process and then the total days. Okay. So if they tell you that, you know, I don't know, like they filed the legal notice, well, you know that you're about 60 days in, right? So, and then you can gauge how many days are left. So super handy. Some of them have like 2 pages, like DC has 4 pages worth of information, but anyways, super handy to use when you're looking at what the state rules are and how long it's going to take. All right. Okay, so that's kind of the basics. If it's in bankruptcy, again, I don't have a lot of information on bankruptcy because I haven't done a note that is in bankruptcy, but you would do the same kind of thing. You want to know where they're at in the process and what type of bankruptcy it is. Like I said, I haven't had to do that yet, so I'm not going to go very deep into it, but it's kind of a similar process. You want to just know where the steps are, what stage is it at. So now, how do you get a lot of this due diligence done? And I came across Baldwin Advisory Group. His name is, Dickie Baldwin. He's in Texas. And he's got a really awesome company where it's basically dedicated to note investors. And they do all the research. So I've used him numerous times since I got going in the note business. And he's been awesome. Like basically what I do is if I get a note bid approved, I email Dickie and I say, can you get me a BPO in, Detroit, Michigan? Here's the address. I need a broker price opinion and I need a 2-owner title search. And he's like, okay, I'll get on it. And then the next day he's like, all right, I've ordered your BPO. Should be here in a couple of days and your title search should be here tomorrow and it's done. So it's really awesome. If you need someone to drive by and look at the house, he can get you someone that can do that. Like he does pretty much anything you'd need. He can do it. They have access to RMLO services, appraisals, title work. If you want someone to drive by your property to make sure it's okay, like even if you want a rental in some other state, you want someone to drive by your rental, check out your tenants, check on your tenants, they can do that. They do collateral reviews to make sure there's no errors. They can cure title issues. So it's really awesome. He's a great guy. he's been in the business, like he's pretty old. He's been in the business for a very long time, and he's got connections like literally everywhere in the country. So far, he's never turned me down as far as being able to find someone that can do it for me, even in kind of more rural areas. So that's one. And then another company, which I just started working with about 2 months ago, they're in California, Casey Wilson and Associates, and they will do all of your collateral review. So if you buy a note and they give you, the seller gives you the assignments and everything, the allonges, the assignments, the note, the deed of trust, like all of that stuff, all of those documents, they will review all of them for you before you buy that note to make sure that there's no errors at all or any documents missing. They'll do a title search to make sure that they've all been recorded correctly, that the dates are accurate, everything's been signed. All of those things, they're basically there to look for errors, and then they can actually help you cure the errors. So you may find an error, like a document missing or something. Well, first of all, you could maybe get the price down a bit with that note seller. You could say, well, I'm not buying this. You're missing one assignment or something like that. Well, this company can actually go and correct the problem. If you can, if they're missing a document, they can file a lost note affidavit or a lost document affidavit, or whatever is needed to cure the problem. So they're a really great company to have in your back pocket. And also they will store your notes for you in a safe. So if you don't really want to be holding onto your paper, in your filing cabinet, they can actually keep all of your collateral files and all of your documents safe for you. And then if you ever sell that note, you just tell them to, who they're sending all those documents to. And they will record the documents with any county court or, deed records. So if you get an assignment of mortgage, they will record it with that county so that everything's done for you. And then a couple other things. If you do need a title search, Pro Title USA, they can do it as well. I've done that even just buying tax deeds with Mike after taking his course in Houston. I've used them for a couple title searches for tax deeds before. And then the other thing I didn't really talk about is insurance. So if you're buying a non-performing note, the borrower hasn't been making their loan payments, they probably haven't been paying insurance either, right? And that's important because if you're going to buy a note and your investment is secured to a property, and then that property burns down the next day or something, obviously that's a big issue, right? So if there's no insurance policy, you can put on what's called force-placed insurance, which is you have a right as a lender to put on your own insurance policy to protect yourself and your investment in that property. Okay. So if you ever need force-placed insurance to make sure you're protected, Ross Diversified Insurance is an option for you. Okay. A lot of performing notes, they'll be collecting insurance payments as part of the monthly payment, right? They'll collect principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Okay. So you might be covered when you buy a performing note. It might already be being paid out of the monthly payment. And then you would just have to get yourself added as a primary loss payee on the insurance policy or whatever they have is for the lender. So you're also covered just like the lender was before who sold you that note. Okay. So you always want to make sure you are on the policy as a lender or a primary loss payee. Okay. Hey, that brings us to servicing. So as I mentioned, we talked a lot about the seller having a servicing company, but you should have a servicing company as well, because as Mike likes to say a lot, like we're in here to like do what we're good at and what we love, but we don't want to be doing, all the day-to-day stuff, right? We don't want to be doing the bookkeeping and all that. We want to have someone that's trained to do what we don't want to do or what we can't do or what we don't have time to do. And so this is one of those things, is having a company that can take care of your note, reach out to the borrower immediately. So once you buy the note, you get your servicing company to reach out to basically they send a welcome letter to the borrower saying, hey, we are now in charge of this note. We are going to be collecting payments from you from now on. This is where you send your payments, or they'll do an automatic debit. They'll get that all set up for you. They'll also try and help you with a non-performing note, filing any notices that need to be done, giving any warnings that need to be done, per the state laws. And so they're basically there to look out for you and manage your note for you. Okay. And so you want to have that lined up before you close on a note as well. I've been using Covey Financial in Texas. They're a good one. And they do not every state, but they do, I would say, the majority of states. And then here's a couple other ones as well I've got links to that. Actually, I bought a note and I've kept going with the same servicing company. So I've been using Note Servicing Center for one note, and they've done a good job so far for a performing note. And I bought a note from Biffy Loan Servicing recently. One of their clients is selling a note, and they seem to be doing a good job as well. So a couple options there for you guys if you need a servicing company. Okay. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Foreclosure attorney, that's the other good thing. So again, if you're buying a non-performing note, it's good to make sure you've lined up an attorney right away before you close, even if it's just an introductory email or call, making sure that they'd be able to step in for you. You probably want to pick their brain a bit about what the process is and the costs and everything. But you want to have that lined up so that when you buy that note, if it is non-performing, you can execute right away. If you need to foreclose, you're not wasting your time and money, just idling. They can step in and do their job right away if you end up having to foreclose. Okay, so again, Baldwin Advisory Group, they have referred me to foreclosure attorneys in various states. So a lot of times your servicing company might already have some people in mind. And you can also talk to other note investors and see who they've used as well. Okay, then the last part of this is, okay, well, how do you close and fund a deal? Like, what is that process? And actually, I pulled this from Bigger Pockets because not Bigger Pockets, PaperStack, because their platform is so streamlined and systematized that it's a great way to visualize the entire process. And I actually recommend, if you do buy a note, even if you don't buy it through PaperStack, but say you find a note seller and you want to buy the note from them, you could actually still get PaperStack to handle the closing and funding process for you. And I think if you're a brand new note investor, it's not a bad idea. You have to pay a little bit, but a couple $100, but it might be worth it just so you can see every step of the process, know that it's going to be handled correctly and in order. And then once you've done a note or two, and you understand the steps, well, then you can do it without them. But I just pulled the screenshot from their website. And so these are kind of the steps. So basically what happens is, you negotiate a price, right? You make your bid, the seller accepts it, you accept the bid. Then the next step is your closing terms, which are typically just like, well, when am I going to fund? So I'm going to fund April 1st. So I'm going to have 2 or 3 weeks to do my new due diligence. We'll fund April 1st. Okay. Seller approves, buyer approves. All right. You approve the price, everything's good. Okay. The vesting information is just something you'd enter in. So are you buying it in an LLC? Well, what's the name of the company? Are you buying your IRA? What's your IRA number, right? So that all gets entered in. Then you want to make sure that the actual balances are verified. So again, you want to get the payment history. You want to know exactly what the unpaid balance is at the time of closing, because your servicing company needs the most accurate numbers, because you're transferring everything. All the accounting is going to be transferred over. Okay. Then once you've done all of your due diligence and you're ready to keep going, you're ready to pull the trigger, and all the numbers have been verified by the seller and you, well, then you're going to have a purchase and sale agreement that you're going to sign. Okay. And typically the seller would provide that. It doesn't have to be. You could have your own, or you could have an attorney draft one. The great thing about PaperStack, though, is they already provide one and it's already filled in. So when you get to that stage, it's going to have your company name on there. It's going to have the property address, legal description, all of that. It's all going to be on there, the borrower name. So it makes it really easy. All you have to do is just review it, and then you just sign the purchase agreement online. Okay. So that's kind of the negotiation phase. Now that you have that signed purchase agreement, you've got a little bit more control because now they have to honor that, as do you. And so the next thing is with PaperStack, you'd provide your wiring info, or the seller would, sorry, of course, because you're going to basically be wiring your funds to the, in this case, you'd wire it to PaperStack, but sometimes you may be wiring it directly to that note seller. So if Jonathan and I are doing a transaction and I'm buying a note from him, I'd actually be wiring the funds to Jonathan. Okay. If you're uncomfortable with that, or you're not sure you trust the seller, you could get a real estate attorney to handle that transaction and use their escrow account to fund the deal as well. And that's kind of what Bigger Pockets does, is it's a third party that's going to be able to make sure that everyone gets paid. No one's going to rip the other person off. Then you're going to talk about where's the collateral going to be shipped to. So your address, probably, right? You want to have a copy of the note, deed of trust, assignments in your name so that the mortgage is being assigned to you, the allonge, all of those documents that are transferring ownership from them to you. You're going to need originals of that to keep. And so they need to know where to send that to. Then you got to talk about servicing. So who's going to service your note? Because they're going to need to be provided all of the information that the current owner has, the current servicing company. They're going to have to transfer all of their documents and spreadsheets and everything over to your servicing company so that they can take over. Or maybe you're going to use the same servicing company, which is obviously easier. Okay. Yeah, and then so everything's good. You've got your purchase agreement, you've done your due diligence, you've got your servicing lined up, everything's good. Well, then you'd wire your funds to, in this case, PaperStack has an escrow account. You wire it in. If everything looks good on your end and their end, then they would release the funds. The other good thing about PaperStack is they have their own auditor. So they would actually ship all of the collateral file to their auditor to make sure there's no errors, make sure everything looks good. And then once it gets approved by their third party auditor, then they would have you sign a disbursement agreement. And then they'd execute all the documents to you. And then they distribute the funds to the seller and they send you your collateral. And now you own the note. Okay. So that's the process. You can see there's quite a few steps. And so it might be easier to have a system like this in place. And that's why I recommend maybe using PaperStack for your first one or two. Okay, so that is it. Any questions about any of that? All right.
I have one.
Yeah.
So this is more of a strategic question, but with all the caveats and watch out for stuff, like what are 3 good reasons to invest in a note? Because there's a lot of danger Will Robinson warning signs throughout the 3 parts that you presented.
Well, cash flow. You're secured to a piece of real estate. You don't have to worry about tenants, toilets, trash outs, vacancies, contractors, all of that stuff. It is a way to get properties. If you're looking to actually acquire properties, you're seeing pre foreclosures before all the other, sharks come in when they smell blood, all the other investors out there that are looking for foreclosures. You're going to get access to them ahead of time because you're going to own the note first. And I don't know, I don't see, like, there's not, maybe I made it seem like there's a lot of warning signs. I just want to paint the picture of like all the things that you need to do in the process. But I found it's actually quite a bit less than buying property, because like I've bought, fix and flips and stuff where we remove the cabinets and there's a ton of mold behind and, things like that you don't really foresee. Whereas if you're going to be buying a note, you're never really owning that property. If it's performing, you don't really care as much. If you're going to foreclose and you know that there's enough, spread between what the borrower owes and your purchase price, then you're going to sell it off at the auction. So you're not going to own it in that case. So a lot of it's way less hands-off, and in some ways it's a lot less risk. I think where the risk comes is if you're going to be taking a property back in foreclosure and you know that you're going to be owning it, then it's the same kind of risk as if you're buying a house, right? You got to make sure you're okay with unknowns and making sure you know kind of a, get someone to look through the windows to see the condition of the property if you have to. So
Thank you.
you bet. Anything else?
All right. Any other questions?
So
You're
here's my
still on
contact
presenter
info.
mode, Cal.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
You're still on presenter mode, so all we can
Okay.
see.
There we
There
go.
we go. There we go. Any other questions for Cal? Oh, Michael, or no. Nope. I thought for sure Michael would have a question. All right, no questions. I can't believe it. Melanie's got her hand up. Okay, I knew somebody would have a question.
Yeah, I do. So I'm wondering, Cal, first of all, though, this is our last one, right?
It is,
It
yeah.
is. So if we want to keep Cal for, we got to ask him lots of questions or he's going to be gone.
This
So
just feels too soon after our what, 8-week turn to 12-week wholesaling course. I'm like,
actually
Yeah,
turned to
you're
16.
expecting-
Turned to 16.
oh, 16, whatever it was. Yeah, like so this feels weird that we're like winding up for good.
Well, I might bribe Cal to come back pretty soon. So he thinks he's done, but we know better. So
Yeah, right. What are we need more of you, Cal.
All right. Well, I'll see what I can come up with. Maybe like I bake sourdough. Maybe I should come on next week
oh,
and
hey,
we
now
can
we're
discuss
talking.
that.
Yeah, food.
There we go, bread making 101, huh?
Sign me up.
I love it. Okay, so I'm wondering about the investors thing. Like if you're jumping into this without money,
Mhm.
like how easy, how hard have you found it to be to find investors to fund these note deals? Like, like at least the ones where like you're in the middle, the middleman, and that's what
Yeah.
I'm really curious about. Is that doable? Is it easy? Is it hard?
I would say it's the same with any kind of real estate deal. I mean, raising capital for a lot of people is a challenge. You got to get out of your comfort zone. And you got to know your stuff and be confident in presenting, what you're doing for sure. And also I found, and I think Mike would probably agree, like, again, this is something Mike told me when I was first getting started, like you got to be marketing yourself and showing the world what you're doing. So whether that's, creating YouTube videos or going to networking events. And that's, if you guys see any of this, well, I'm sorry, because my VA was like flooding you guys' Facebook group with stuff and I didn't even realize. But all of that content I make out there, all the videos, all of that stuff, it's for two reasons. One of them is like, I do like to share and teach people. I want to help other people get involved in real estate, learn real estate. I've had some great people teach me, just like Mike. I like to give back. But another reason that I do it is because if people see what I'm doing, they see the projects I'm doing, the kind of returns or whatever, there's people out there that don't have the time, don't have the knowledge. They're not connected to people like Mike and this group like you are, right? But they also realize that they don't maybe want their money in the stock market, or they've got IRA money sitting doing nothing. So Melanie, if they see you, buying notes or wholesaling houses or whatever, they may say, well, I trust Melanie. She's a great person. She's obviously found something that's working for her and she knows more than me. I'd rather just, partner with her, give her my funds and get involved in one of the deals she's doing. Right. And so that's how I've had most of my success, is just by sharing that. And I've found that, you got to market. It's like any other business, like even Coca-Cola, right? They still market, even though everyone knows who they are. And so I've just kind of made it my weekly routine, is to constantly just come out with content, get in front of people, and people will start coming to you wanting to get involved. So
You found most
Yeah.
of your investors that way?
Yeah. Like I've had people reach out to me even just from YouTube videos. My first private investor, I was doing like tax deed walkthrough videos on YouTube, and he happened to find one. And he's like, hey, this seems awesome. I can't find deals. I've been trying. Let's do something together, So that's like the part about finding deals. The way I structure my business, and you'd probably want to do the same, is If you structure it as a private loan, just like a hard money loan or a private lender, like with my business for notes, I pay 8 to 10% typically to my investor, and it's a loan. So they're actually signing a funding agreement, and they are basically saying, we're going to buy this note. You're going to fund the, 50 grand. Okay. It's going to be to buy this note that's secured to this property. And then, so that's the agreement I have with them that states, that they're going to be paid interest. I'm going to make the payments quarterly, and it's going to be for 36 months, say. Okay. And then, we're going to go on the ownership of the note. They might actually come on with me. So it might be like my company 51% and their company 49%. And it's actually going to go on the assignment of mortgage. When you get that note assigned to you, they're going to be secured to that property because they're also on that note, right? So they've got security. So if something goes wrong, they're on the note, they get paid, right? If you foreclose, they have to get paid because they're on that note as well as you. So they're secured that way. Okay. The other way you could do it, I think, is if you have a bigger funding partner that's maybe got more, deeper pockets, you may want to set up an LLC together and both be the managing members of the LLC. And then you could do more of like a 50-50 or something like that, because you guys both own the notes inside the LLC. And in that case, I think you'd want to do, like I say, with more money involved. And if you're planning on buying multiple notes, then you could own them all in that LLC together. So.
Yeah, so I'm gonna add to that just a little bit.
Yeah.
So raising money is really difficult if you don't put any effort to raise money. And raising money is super easy once there's, as Malcolm Gladwell would say, and the tipping point, you reach this tipping point where it becomes so easy. I get people like all the time, like at least once a week, somebody will send me an email saying, I've got X amount of dollars. How do I work with you? And I'm self-funded now. I wish these people were there 35 years ago because I could have really used them. So it gets to the point where you don't even have to try to raise money and people want to work with you, but you got to get to that point. And to get to that point, you got to just kind of keep moving ahead and, as Cal said, put yourself out there, make it known what you do. Don't be like America's best kept secret. Make sure people know that you're investing in real estate. Make sure they know that you're actively looking for deals. Even if you find deals that are crappy deals, say, hey, I went and looked at this note today and did my due diligence, and no, I'm not going to do this one. And so just show people that you're actually doing the work. The other thing I'll say is there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines right now because a lot of people can't find deals, or a lot of people are scared, or they're waiting for something to change in the economy, whether it be interest rates or whatever. And they've got all this money sitting in their bank account that's earning them nothing, and they're looking for opportunities. But they want it to be safe, and they want it to be with people they know, like, and trust. So you need to be that person for them. There's also a lot of people with money in their IRAs. They've got money for their retirement, and they have no idea that they can make it self-directed and invest in real estate and work with you, for example. So you've also got to be an educator and show them this is what's possible. You can take that money, work with me, and I'll get you a way better return than what you're currently getting. So it's not that difficult. It's not rocket science, but the toughest part is getting started, because a lot of us, and I was definitely guilty of this when I first started. I almost felt like it was kind of dirty to ask other people for money. Like, why would somebody want to invest with me? But as time went on, I realized, especially now, quite often I'm the one signing a check. I've done a lot of hard money loans, for example. It's way easier to sign that check than it is to go and build a team to go fix properties and manage properties. And there's a lot more moving parts. The lender has it pretty easy, as long as obviously their money's safe. All they've got to do is sign that check. And so after a while, I realized, you know what, I'm doing them a favor, and I'm creating a win-win for them, and I'm giving them opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. And so you just need to change your mindset around that. Because I know that when I was young, it's like I felt so guilty. First couple of times I was asking for money, I felt like I was going to go to jail for doing something wrong. So, but now, like I said, I don't even go looking for it. I don't really need it, but people are all the time looking for ways to work with me, and I don't really take on any like super big. Well, by my standards, I feel like my projects aren't that big, so I don't need other people's money to do them. But every day, like I said, emails come in from strangers that I've never even met before, looking for ways to invest. So so it's really difficult until it becomes really, really easy. And then so my advice is just get started, start putting some use social media to get yourself out there a little bit. And like I said, if you're doing the work, even if you're not successful in finding something, show that too. Just show that you're actually, so people start to see you as the real estate investor and not just think of you as a piano teacher. And so so that's one comment. And then another comment is, I know that I always get Cal's emails with all these deals coming in. And I was actually talking to Cal yesterday. And so if any of you want to invest with him, he's going to be doing most of the work. If not, actually, he's going to be doing all the work. And you can watch as he does it. You can watch and learn. But you could also once again, get other people's money. And I was talking to Cal yesterday, and he'd be willing to pay you if you're able to find, let's say he was looking for, I don't know, make up a number, $50,000, and you were able to raise that $50,000. I asked him if he would pay an affiliate fee to the Wolfpack. So even if you don't feel confident doing the first deal and taking somebody's money, well, bring it in and work with Cal. You're going to learn as you go. You're going to get paid, and it becomes a win-win-win. So it's just something to keep in mind, that, because I know obviously if you've never done a note deal, it would definitely, and I know I would feel very, what's the right word? Scared to take somebody else's money and invest in something I haven't done before. So do your first one with Cal, maybe your first few with Cal, if you can raise the money. And you can even, instead of saying you're going to do the deal, say you're partnered up with Cal. I think Cal would be all right with that. So you're partnered with somebody who's got a lot of experience, and that'll make it easy to raise the money at first. And then after a while, you'll know how to do it. And then you'll have some case studies. And then it becomes real, I won't say easy, it becomes a lot easier to raise that money once you've got, because your confidence, the biggest thing that makes it difficult is a lack of confidence. Because if you don't believe in yourself, people can feel that. And if you are very confident, people can feel that too. So we have to get you to the point where it's like, hey, I know I can do this, and Cal can get you there, because I can't yet, but Cal could definitely hold your hand through the whole thing and create a reward for your investor, for you, and of course Cal wins too. So just something to think about.
Yeah, that's
like, sorry, go ahead, Melanie.
Oh yeah.
I was just gonna say, so we're talking over each other. You go ahead.
Oh, I'm pretty much done. You go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, back in 2009, I did my first deal with Mike, and he had a whole team in place in Vegas, where he is right now. Like, I honestly didn't have a clue what I was doing, right? Like, but I trusted Mike. And so we did a deal, but I like used that deal as a case study, and I put all my numbers, I had photos, like I had the whole thing. And then I presented that to other investors and was able to do more deals, when really, like, what did I do in that deal? Nothing. Like, I just relied on Mike and his team, right? But it was enough to, open that door, show some experience, right? And so I recommend anyone, any kind of deal you're doing with someone else, try to use that as an opportunity to grow. So like, document everything, take extra photos, talk about how you feel and like what the steps are, because you can leverage that in your future when you're marketing for future deals and future investors. So
Awesome.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Melanie.
Oh, I was just going to say, I like what Mike said too about it's a build-up process. It'll take some time, but once you get the trust factor, the networking in place, it'll start to just tipping point, and then deals or investors' money starts to come to you. And I'm just curious, have you experienced that yet, Cal? Are you still kind of building it up, or when you have a deal, do you pretty much can find an investor in the next day or two, or is it still, just curious what your experience with that has been so far? And
it really depends on the timing and the deal itself. Like, I have some deals where it's like that day, and then other times it's like it's a bit of a struggle. I've got to make some phone calls, and because not everyone's always watching what I'm emailing out, right? So sometimes I have to make calls and just say, hey, did you see this? And sometimes they haven't, and that investor, maybe they don't have funds available right now. They're in the middle of another transaction. So I'm not at the point where, like, I know every single deal I get, I can get funding. And that's part of the reason that Mike and I were talking. Like, if you guys have capital, like in people that are wanting to deploy money, we're happy to pay a referral for that, because yeah, I'm not at the point where every single deal I can get funded right now. So that's kind of where I'm at, is the growth stage.
You're still in the growth, but when you get there and you're still experiencing overall that it's not that difficult though, right?
Yeah, like I've done a lot of deals with private investors. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and you know, it just gets easier every single time.
And you're still paying 8% to a private investor on a note?
Yep. Yep. If it was something where I knew it was going to be like a foreclosure, and either we were going to fix and flip it, like if it was in Texas or something, or I knew that if we were to sell that property at a foreclosure and there's going to be a big payout, then I would definitely offer more. It just depends on the deal. But if it's a performing note, like think about it. If someone's paying, you know, $500 principal and interest, it's hard to offer more in the mortgage note space than 8 to 10% and still have something left over for you, right? Because you're talking about a small amount of payments, right? So it kind of depends on what the exit strategy is. But there's a lot of people that are making 6, 5, 4%, and they're just looking for opportunities to make 8 to 10%. So just got to find them.
It's a great win-win. Yeah, I love the whole concept of it.
Right.
You know, and that's the other thing I've had to learn is, like, sometimes people say, I don't want, you know, 8%. I made, you know, 12%. It's like, okay, well, you're not the investor for me. Like, if you know how to find 12, 20% deals, go for it. Have at her, right? You're obviously not the kind of person I'm looking to work with. I'm looking for people that look at 8 to 10%. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I can't wait to get going, because they would never be able to find that kind of an opportunity. So everyone's got their target, right?
Yeah, I think the bigger picture for the wolf pack is if you can just get a deal under your belt, even if, like Cal said, you didn't do any of the work, you were just teamed up with them, just having a case study and being able to go through it. Because, you know, imagine, so here's one of the things that I teach on the tax deed training that you're all going to get to go to one of these days when the auctions get better, is that imagine you come down to Texas and we spend 4 days together, and then you go back home and you go to a real estate meetup. And the first thing people are going to ask you is, you know, oh, well, what kind of real estate are you doing? And if you're in Calgary or California or Toronto or Vermont or Florida or Utah, and you go back and you say, oh, I specialize in Texas tax deeds, people are going to go, what the heck is that? They're going to have no idea what a Texas tax deed is. And so imagine you have a case study where you show, hey, we bought this property for 20,000, we flipped it after X amount of months for 60,000 or 80,000 or whatever. People are going to be blown away by that, and they're not going to know how to do it. And they also can't circumvent you, because you got to remember, you've got the team that I'm giving you, you've got the training that they don't have, and they would have to fly down to Texas over and over and over again. And if they don't know how to do the strategy properly, they're going to lose all their money. So they can't circumvent you. So if you were to go and say, listen, if you're willing to, you know, we can get more deals like this. The only thing stopping me is I need more capital so I can take down more deals. So imagine if you said, hey, you know what, but I'm willing to split. I'll do all the work. My teams will do all the work. You won't have to get on an airplane. You won't have to learn how to do the strategy. If you just put up the money, we'll split the deal 50-50. People are going to have a really hard time saying no to that, because they can't do it themselves. And once again, they can't circumvent you. And most of the people don't have, you know, that kind of opportunity. So once again, it becomes really easy when you have something that they can't just go and duplicate. So if you said, oh, I'm buying properties on the MLS and I got this realtor and he's finding me deals, well, the next day they're going to call up that realtor or a realtor and find similar deals. They don't need you. But whenever you're doing something that they don't know how to do, in this case, Cal with the notes, if you know how to do that successfully, even if it's Cal doing all the work, well, now it's really easy to go and raise that money, because now you've got some case studies. It's a lot different than you say, hey, I'm kind of learning how to do notes. Do you want to invest with me? That's a little scary for most investors. If you say, hey, here's a track record, then it becomes a lot easier for somebody to say yes to that.
So, Cal, have you done anything more than just kind of putting yourself out there, emails, YouTube videos, or has that pretty much been keeping you with all you've needed? Or I guess I'm curious if you've done like direct mail or anything like that and just trying to get investors for notes.
Yeah. So another good way to do it is if you like, what county are you in? Melanie?
County?
Yeah.
I'm in Davis County currently in Utah. Is that what you mean?
Okay.
Or
Yeah. So if you went in, I don't know what they call the office where they keep their deed records. It could be the recorder's office, or I'm not sure, in Utah. But you could go to the website where they keep the deeds and mortgages that you record, right? You record it with the county, whatever that is, that office. And you can type in, you just type in the names of the big IRA companies. So there's like Quest is a big one, especially in Texas. What the heck's the other big one? Equity Trust, that's the other big one. And then you could just Google like the top 5 biggest IRA companies, and then just type that in the search and do like limit it for like the last year. And so you're going to get anyone that's bought a piece of real estate in their IRA, anyone that's done a private loan with their IRA, or bought or sold. Those are all going to be people that understand real estate and like it and have capital in their IRA account. And then you can actually send them a letter or a text message or an email, like skip trace them and start marketing to them. And I've actually had success. I'm working with some lenders right now that I met that way. And I didn't know them before, but just sending them sample deals, and I've got case studies I've shown, and we've had conversations. And, they're like either waiting for the next deal, or we're kind of still working on that process of getting there. Sometimes it takes a while, but like that's how you can start and find people publicly that you already know, understand it, and get it, and have money. So that's a good way to do it.
you have done some of that too, along.
Yep.
I guess just curious all the strategies you've done.
Yep.
Besides just
Yep. I've actually got a VA that does that a little bit every day. They go in different counties and just pull names and skip trace. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. There's lots out there. I mean, there's a million counties. I don't know how many actual counties, but there's a lot of counties out there.
A lot of counties,
so, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of opportunity there. So, well, thanks. That gives me a feel for that and how that's been working with the notes and your experience with it. So, thanks for explaining all that.
Yeah, you bet. And so that's why it's good to have a case study, because what I mail is I have a letter that says who I am, what I do, and on the back of it, it's got a case study. And then I've got another letter that I'll mail that maybe has 2 other case studies on it, and then just a little bit more information. And of course, they're going to have the call to action to reach you. But that if they like what they see on that case study, they're going to be like, oh, this is interesting. This person seems to know what they're doing. Maybe they'll Google you, right? If you've got videos and other stuff, they're going to maybe want to give you a call because they see that you know your stuff. So, yep.
Yeah, well, I've been impressed, and I'm on your email list and the videos and stuff. I just saw one today earlier that you had posted out, or maybe your VA, like you'd said. But yeah, I've been impressed with what you're doing that way and putting yourself out there.
I just try to think of just different ways of creating even just like a little 1-minute TikTok. Even though, like, I hate TikTok. I hate the fact that I'm on TikTok, but people are on it.
I'm on there too. I've never actually been on there myself.
I've never looked at another video. Yeah. They're probably listening right now. But you do one video and you can share it to TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn, all with one VA and a platform that can post to all those channels at once. Like, there's lots of different companies that can do that. So on the weekends, I try to make like at least one video, maybe like 5 videos, and then have them spread out over the week or whatever it is. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
And you could do that too. You could do that too, Melanie, because you're learning stuff as you go, and you could be putting stuff out there. You don't have to pretend you're the expert, that you've done 1,000 deals. You can just say, hey, you know what I learned? I learned this today, and then just make a short little video just to get people seeing your face. Wherever I go these days, by the way, everybody thinks I'm stalking them on Facebook, because apparently you guys probably noticed that my team is putting a lot of content out there. But everywhere I go, in places where people know me, they're all saying, "Oh man, I keep getting your videos," and so you could be doing that too, and just raising awareness for what you're doing. And like I said, everybody who knows you, unless you're telling them you're in real estate, they're seeing you as a piano teacher, and there's nothing wrong with being the piano teacher. But as a piano teacher, it's hard to raise money. As the
Yeah.
successful real estate investor, it's a lot easier to raise the money.
Well, and it's hard to make money as a
Yes,
piano.
that too. Yes, that too. That too. I
Why I'm here. So
That's right, exactly. And teaching piano, when I was a kid, I didn't do very well at that, or learning.
well,
But
that's like one of my passions that I love, but I'm like, I don't see my piano studio as sustaining. So that's why I'm in the wolf pack. So
yeah. Well,
have enough.
I would be making some videos, and US is going to ban TikTok, Michael Matthew says. Is that true?
They passed in the House unanimously, I think,
Hmm.
that it either has to be divested from its Chinese parent,
Hmm.
or they're going to ban it in 6 months. Hasn't passed the Senate yet,
Interesting.
but there's a lot
Anyway,
of politics in it, obviously.
yeah, definitely. So for the next 6 months, post to TikTok and all those other places. Then after that, you won't be able to go on TikTok, but that's okay. Because I love YouTube, by the way, because it's owned by Google. And if you have a video on YouTube, Google is going to give you preferential treatment when somebody Googles your topic. So, and YouTube, the videos don't disappear. They stay there forever, so anyway, do
The
them
other
all.
thing-
That's a great thing do you use StreamYard, Cal?
I haven't used StreamYard yet, but that's where you can record a video and then have it look like it's live in multiple
Yeah, or you can
platforms.
actually do it, or sometimes we do every now and then we do a live, and then we can have it streaming on all those platforms, YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and Insta, all at the same time. And so you do something one time and it's like everywhere. So it doesn't matter, because everybody has their own preference for what social media they like. So wherever they're at, wherever your audience happens to be at, they can watch it. So it's great. Anyways, not here to plug StreamYard, but it works pretty good. Any other questions for Cal? Anyone? How do
Actually, I just got one thing that I learned recently, since we're talking about TikTok, is you can watch someone else's TikTok video on a certain topic, and then you can respond to their video by recording your own video, and it'll show what they're like. Say they make a comment, or they have their own video, whichever. Maybe they make a comment, like they comment on someone's video and say, there's no opportunities in real estate anymore. You could actually respond to their comment, and it puts it in the top of your little TikTok video window. And then you could act like the expert and say, well, actually, I found this many deals doing direct mail, blah, blah, blah. Here's how you do it. If you want to learn more, contact me. And it goes to all of the people that followed that thread, plus it posted on your wall. And so you can go and get in on all these conversations with different audiences and come in as an expert, and grow your following that way too. It's pretty neat.
Wow.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's exciting, really, all the options out there and technology to help us. And so, yeah.
So any other questions? Going once?
I actually did have another one if nobody else does.
Sure, yeah. The stage is yours.
Just another quick question. So Cal, you said that this has been so much easier than wholesaling, and a lot of good perks about notes as compared to wholesaling. I'm curious here how it compares to like the overages that you were also doing. Are you still doing those, or like
Yes, the overages I found can be good, but it's pretty competitive. So I just got to the point after a while, like I still do a little bit of it, but I just found that a lot of I'd send out letters and people would be calling, be like, this is the 10th, postcard or whatever that I've gotten this month. And so it's tough to find, like you can still get leads, but I found it's just hard to get a consistent, enough to do full time kind of a thing. So you can make money doing it, but I just wasn't able to figure out a way. Like I had some people like Arizona, for example, mortgage foreclosure. I'd send them something the next day and they'd be like, oh yeah, I've already signed up with somebody. It's like, but the foreclosure was yesterday.
Mhm.
So like
Wow.
there's people that have figured out, I don't know if they're reaching out ahead of time. And I just haven't gotten that far to try and figure it out. But there's definitely ways to make money at it, but I just couldn't make a ton of it. So I moved on to something a little easier and less
Well,
I
market.
think the other thing you're going to find, by the way, is when the economy gets worse, then you've got more foreclosures, then you have more auctions, then you have more overages. So,
That's true.
obviously during COVID, when there's very little, if any foreclosure activity, if there's
Yeah.
no auctions, no overages. So, but
There
there's
were, yeah,
also,
no mortgages at all because they're all in forbearance and stuff.
yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
so timing's everything. And that's why when I teach you guys, that's why I don't have like a set schedule. I don't say, hey, in July, we're going to learn this, because I want to teach you what's relevant and what's working right now. And that's why I haven't done the tax deed training, for example, because it's not working that great right now, or the overages yet. But as we get more and more foreclosures, obviously, that's going to increase the inventory, and then that stuff will make sense. But the good thing is there's always notes. It doesn't matter, good economy, bad economy, there's always notes. So, so anyway, I'm super glad that we had Cal here to show us the ropes on the notes.
Yes.
Oh, Judith, I see your question there. Do I prefer notes over wholesaling? Yeah. So the only reason that I kind of got burned out with wholesaling is because I live in Canada and I've got it in my head that I don't want to do Canadian deals. It's a lot harder here. And so trying to wholesale down in Texas from up here, like I had a really great partner down there for a while. And then he got a great opportunity to basically take over ownership of a company. So he wanted to move on. And I was kind of left with nobody on the ground. And so that was just the point where I was just feeling really tired and I didn't really want to just build a new team. And I kind of at the same time looked at notes and I just thought, you know what? I don't necessarily need that kind of intense team where you got to be going to houses like quickly and all over the city and coordinating it all and inspections and blah, blah, blah. So wholesaling is awesome. I think everyone should know how to wholesale because you never know. Like I wholesaled a note last month and I used some of the skills from wholesaling houses, right? Mike and I did a deal that when we did the last call, we wholesaled a deal. So it's always good to have that under your belt and that knowledge. And especially if you can wholesale in your own city or town, I say go at it. Like, why not? And then pick and choose the good deals that come your way and wholesale the rest. So I still think it's a good strategy. It was hard for me doing it across 2 countries and a whole continent. So,
And I think they're both great strategies. And I wouldn't say it's, so you're talking about 2 different animals and it's not which is better. It's like saying which is better,
yeah.
cats or dogs. Well, it depends on your preference, but I think it's best to have cats and dogs and do notes and wholesaling. And just like Cal said, he wholesaled a note. So it's not like, I think it's, every real estate investor should know how to do a wholesale deal. Well, they don't necessarily have to make that their full-time career, but you at least need to know how to do it, because you're going to come across deals that are good for somebody else, but not good for yourself for whatever reason. Like, for example, you might be looking for rental properties and you only want 3-bed, 2-bath or more. There's other investors that are just looking for cheap properties. So why would you throw it back? You're not going to toss it back in the water when you can give it to somebody else, create a win for them and get paid for it. So I think absolutely everybody needs to know how to wholesale and knowing how to do notes on top of that. Like, the more tools you have in your tool belt, the better off you're going to be, because as we know, the market changes, the economy changes, and the type of deals that work will change as as these things happen in the economy. So I think it's good, and that's why we have such a wide variety of content. But yeah, I love wholesaling. Like I said, I've done notes only on a very small scale, but after learning from Cal, super excited. I'll probably do my notes through Cal, me personally, because I like to delegate. But it's also a great strategy. So you can enjoy your dogs, you can enjoy your cats all at the same time.
But you did find that it was easier to do notes remotely, just overall, of course, than wholesaling, or
Well, again, it depends on your strategy. Like if I'm looking at non-performing notes that are in foreclosure and they're vacant, well, the only thing that's probably going to come out of that is I'm going to foreclose. No one's going to bid. I'm going to take the property back. Now I've got an empty house that probably needs repairs that I now own. And so I'm going to have kind of the same kind of a team as if I'm wholesaling, right? I'm going to need to know contractors and realtors and buyers, blah, 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 right? So that's one thing. But if you're not really, if that's not your focus, which it's not really my focus is performers, performing notes, or notes where we can work with that borrower, get them back on track. It doesn't really matter if it's in Cleveland or Miami or wherever, because we're not really worried about the property. We're more focused on the borrower and their payments, right? And if I can buy it at a discount and then foreclose on that property and it's worth, a lot more than the note balance, if I foreclose, and it's just going to sell at the auction. It's just when there's no equity and you have to foreclose, and then you're probably going to take that property back. So it really depends on your strategy, but I'm not really focused on doing rehabs after I foreclose on something. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that makes sense. Great. Thanks.
Excellent. Any other questions? Anyone? All right. Well, Cal, it's been an amazing 3 sessions. I've absolutely loved it. And it's very thorough, and you did a great job as always. I always know you will. So
Thank you.
I'm sure we will have you back in the not too distant future for more on notes or whatever makes sense at that time. How do people get a hold of you if they want to do a deal with you, or they have a friend that they want to connect with you that might want to fund a deal? What's the best way to do that?
I will just see if I can share my screen here real quick. Well, you can reach out to me at talkwithcalewing.com. Or you can just email me at cal@calewing.com, probably the 2 easiest ways.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks again,
Yeah.
Cal. Always a pleasure.
Happy
And
to be here. It's always fun chatting with the wolf pack.
yeah, and Wolfpack, thanks for tuning in and being such great students and asking great questions. Tomorrow night we're back for a Q&A at, let me get this right, 5 p.m. Mountain Time. So come up with your best questions and we will answer them for you. And if they're on notes, I'll try to convince Cal to show up tomorrow too if he can, but no pressure if he can't. But in any case,
Yep, reach out with any questions. I can't be there tomorrow, but email me if you have any questions.
all right. Well, I will be there. Julie can't make it tomorrow, so I'm going to be there by myself. So I hope I have some friends tomorrow with lots of questions. All right, guys, have a great night. Good to see y'all. Thanks again, Cal.
Bye. Thanks,
Everybody,
Cal. Thanks,
appreciate it.
Mike.
Thanks, Cal. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
See you later. You're welcome.
Thank you guys. Have a good night.
Have a great night.